Welcome, everyone. Another exciting edition of Sports on Tap. This is our Week 2 recap, and we're down to a two-man group. It's
We're light. We're light, man.
Josh Jeffy, along with Sean Duffy, Ed, Dick, and Rob Troutman, both out on assignment tonight. Ed, light week in the GLC. We had a couple games, not very good games. If you're a GLC member, we'll talk about those briefly here a little later on the show. Rob did have his SWC recap, which we'll be going over here momentarily. We'll also be discussing our two polls that we had out there. Our G&G Fitness coaches poll, and then our RT Productions Player of the Week poll, which got a lot of votes.
It did.
A tested battle. So we'll go over those a little later on in the show. Sean, how's it going, buddy?
It's going good, man. You know what? You're right. It was a light week in the GLC, so I think we gave old Ed a pass tonight on attending. Rob, you know what? Again, I'm gonna start fighting him for missing shows. We're 2 weeks in. He's the quote unquote captain of this ship, and you know what? He needs to kind of at least make an appearance because Lord knows they ain't paying to see this face. But I will say this. Out of all the leagues, I would say there's a lot of action in the Suburban League, and I can't wait to get to it because there's a lot of great games in that conference. A lot of great games everywhere. We're back into the swing of things. Much more substantial schedule than was last week. And I think this coming week we're going to have probably more additions. A lot of other teams kind of getting up to snuff a little bit, up to speed, and we're going to see a little bit more substance to our weeks, so to speak.
Copy that. And like you mentioned, exciting week. We're getting into it. And like we usually do, we'll start off with the Greater Cleveland Conference. And it was a good week in that conference. We saw the return of Strongsville. We'll get to that game in just a few minutes here. But the game that we're going to lead off on is Mentor and Euclid. These are right now the top two teams most would consider in the conference. Both came into this game 1-0 with victories in week one. And in this game, Euclid opened up the scoring first on 4 plays when Malachi Davis hit Armand Scott from 16 yards out for a touchdown. They went up 7-0 early, and then Mentor took over, specifically Ian Kipp. They railed off 27 straight unanswered points, and they were led by Ian Kipp, who in this game, they were without senior running back Riley Coughlin. He was on the sidelines with an injury. So Kipp rushed for a team-high 85 yards, along with completing 16 passes for 341 yards, 3 touchdowns. And in this game, he actually hit 6 different receivers. So he was spreading the ball around. He did what he had to do to lead his team to victory. Again, 27 straight points Mentor scored in this one. Euclid did get a touchdown late in the third quarter. Malachi Davis again to Clayshawn Ivory from 53 yards. And that was pretty much the story of this ball game. Mentor wins 27-12. They improved to 2-0. Euclid drops to 1-1 on this after week 2. Mentor this week has a huge game. They will host a St. Ed's, who is coming off one of the largest defeats in about 30 years to Akron Hoban. So they're looking to get some redemption out of last week. So they will play host to St. Ed's. Euclid will actually travel to Cleveland Heights. That's going to be a very interesting game that we'll see. As I mentioned before, Strongsville returned. They did have some COVID-19 related issues in their first week. So their week 1 game against Benedictine did get canceled. But they came back against Elyria, and they came out with a victory, 21-12. Now, Coach Serino said, he quoted, that this game was not pretty, but they did what they had to do to get the job done. Strongsville did get on the board first, 44 seconds into the game, when linebacker Michael Novak intercepted quarterback Dalen Charlo, and he ran it to the house, took it to the house, 26 yards. Charlo in this game for Elyria, he had an okay game. He was 14 of 27, 164 yards. He did have a rushing touchdown. But again, for Elyria, they go by Jaheim Atkinson, who was my Player of the Week nominee last week. He continued his good season. He totaled this game 29 carries, 144 yards, and he did get the scoring off for Illyria in the first quarter. He did score from 5 yards out. That actually made the score 7-6. They missed the extra point, and that was the score all the way up until halftime. For Strongsville, Jack Crotty, 2-yard touchdown run. That made it 14-6 at the start of the third quarter. Crotty finished the game with 78 yards rushing. And then Ethan Geis for Strongsville added a 31-yard touchdown reception, and that pretty much ended the scoring for the Mustangs. But they went on to a 21-12 victory. Strongsville's first game of the season. They are 1-0. Elyria drops to 1-1. Next week, Strongsville will play host to Medina. Brunswick, Elyria will host the Brunswick Blue Devils. And those Blue Devils did play Medina in our SOT game of the week, which we'll talk about that a little bit later. That was a very interesting game. A lot of things happened in that game, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Sean, any thoughts about?
It was a fun game to follow, and I can't wait for you to go over that because I was following along with our amazing Twitter coverage, which will expand this Friday, folks. It's not just one game. We're going to be coming at you from all over the area because we're splitting up. We're dividing. We're conquering this great Northeast Ohio football section. But, yeah, I was really impressed with Strongsville. They came out. They had – everyone's had to deal with – the changes of 2020. I guess we can just call it 2020 at this point.
Yeah, right.
But having that COVID issue and canceling week one and then coming back to play a team that had, again, we talked about it last week, that had that opportunity to kind of get their feet wet a little bit and play and kind of get, knock some of the rust off. You were worried that maybe Strongsville would be at a disadvantage. Obviously, they're not in top peak position, but as we mentioned, going forward for a lot of these teams, a lot of the mentality. Coach Hunick on our show a couple weeks ago mentioned it. Very similar to hockey, not where you start, where you finish. So for Strongsville to be able to come out and overcome that adversity and get that win, ugly as it may put them on a path to really having an opportunity to kind of continue to progress throughout this. Doesn't mean they're going to continue that upward ascent. There's going to be rocks, hills there. You still got to go through Mentor. And I'm telling you what, that Mentor team, new coach, old coach, no coach, I think they're running on all cylinders. Going to be interesting now because now they're playing a team, a perennial power that just got punched in the face against Hoban and looking to maybe kind of correct that ship in a big, big way coming this week. So that's going to be a fun matchup to follow too. I'm really excited to see Mentor versus St. Ed's not in a playoff, which is interesting. Usually that's a week one matchup, and it's still there, which I like because Mentor likes to test itself, and they're definitely going to test themselves against one of the top teams, regardless of last week's result, one of the top teams in the area.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Sean, and I failed to mention that Ian Kipp, we talked a lot about him in the recap. He is actually my nominee for the RT Productions Player of the Week. He was my nominee. Our poll actually ended.
Oh, that's right. Yes, it did.
It actually ended. Yeah, we're not used to doing this on Tuesday, but
we're all discombobulated right here.
Yeah, we're actually used to doing this live. So actually, next week when you guys are when we're back next week, we'll actually be live, hopefully, on Facebook Live.
And all of us will be, I think, in a beautiful football coma because we start high school. Some of our teams play college football. Sorry, Big Ten. And then, of course, we can all just agree that the Browns football season is finally upon us. And let's let that roller coaster of a lifestyle begin in earnest this Sunday. But,
and my defense.
You know what? You brought it out. Listen, I know it's your segment. I know it's your segment. I know it's there. Let's keep it classy here, Josh.
Okay, sounds good. Yes, our G&G Fitness Coach of the Poll, we'll go over that a little bit. The Coach of the Week poll, we'll go over that a little bit later. And our RT Productions Player of the Week poll ended. And let's just say it was pretty tight. and we had a lot of votes. We'll talk about that at the end. But Ian Kipp was my nominee from the GCC. So we're going to move slightly.
Who's your Coach of the Week nominee?
Coach of the Week. Oh, thanks, Sean. Mark Pinzoni.
Mark Pinzoni, friend of show.
Friend of show.
Some would say benefactor of the show.
Actually, by the time people see this, they'll probably already know. So Mark Pinzoni, the Brunswick Blue Devils, with a big victory over Medina. We'll go into more detail with that a little bit later. And we should also mention, too, that the Brunswick defense did make the Player of the Week poll as well. And they showed up pretty good in the poll as well. So an all-around good game for the good week for the Blue Devils. And we will go over that again a little bit later on in the show. Let's move on to the Southwestern Conference, the game recaps that were provided by the one and only Rob Troutman. So any mispronunciation or wording that doesn't make sense, blame Rob.
Right. These will be read as given. Sorry, Rob, if you were here, you'd be required to make this up as you go. We get it. But if you provide it to us, myself or Joshua, we'll have to read it as written. So let's go with the grammatical issues.
Yes, here goes nothing. So we're going to start Avon Lake versus Berea Mid Park. This was not a very good game for Berea Mid Park as they go down 63 to 14. The Shoremen made a statement early with their defense as they controlled the line of scrimmage most of the game. Avon Lake defensive end Caden Vinecourt crushed the pocket and picked off Luke Devins for a 42-yard touchdown return. 4 of Avon Lake's 7 first-half drives started inside the Berea Park 40-yard line thanks to either a strong play on defense or special teams. The Shoremen scored touchdowns in all 4. They would hold Berea Mid Park's offense, which this is, just from the past, very hard to do, offense to only 233 yards on the night in the big win. Avon Lake's running back, Gage Dusler, scored 3 times on 13 carries for 78 yards. It was the other Shoreman running back, Jason Krakowski, who stole the show, needing just 3 carries in the final 14 minutes and 8 seconds to pile up 100 yards, most of it coming on a 69-yard touchdown run. Avon Lake quarterback Michael Corbo finished 6 of 11 for 96 yards, hitting 6 different receivers in the process. He connected with Nathan Sacalo for 28-yard touchdown and ran for another from 17 yards out. For Berea Mid Park, wide receiver Devin Johnson was able to carve out a strong effort for 9 catches, 86 yards. D'Angelo Borders added 66 on 4 catches, including a spectacular one-handed grab while going to the ground for 28 yards to set up the Titans' second touchdown. Congratulations to Avon Lake kicker Julia Hurd. Hurd kicked the extra point after the Shoremen's final touchdown, and Coach Matt Kolstanek said he believes she is the first female to score a point for the program. She then handled the ensuing kickoff. So congratulations goes out to Julia for that. That's quite an honor and accomplishment. And that was just part of the game for Avon Lake as they went on to a 63 to 14 victory over Berea Mid Park. Avon Lake is now 1-1 on the season. Berea Mid Park drops to 0-2. Moving on, Midview played against Amherst. Amherst with a big victory, 43 to 21. Midview drops to 0-2. Amherst improves to 2-0. This game was close early on as Amherst kicker Adam Henderson kicked a 27-yard field goal. Midview's defense responded with a pick six, going 40 yards to take the lead 7-3. The Commons answered right back as the kick returner Alden Steele went 99 yards on the kickoff to regain the lead. Midview responded on a 2-yard toss from junior quarterback Ethan Surdock to tight end Preston Bodos. In the second quarter, 2 touchdown passes from Amherst quarterback Tyler Brazina took the lead and Amherst did not look back as they outscored Midview 33-7 from the second quarter on to get a 43-21 victory. Amherst quarterback Tyler Brazina would have had 3 touchdown passes as Amherst got 2 special would have 3 touchdown passes in this game. Amherst got 2 special teams touchdowns from Alden Steele, 1 on a kick return and 1 on a punt return. That is one heck of a night if you're able to get that. And that just shows you, Sean, how important special teams are, because they could play a pivotal role in this game. Without those 2 touchdowns, this game would have been a lot closer.
Yeah, I mean, and you talk about that as well as in the game you mentioned before, is that, big special teams plays usually translate into points. And the game against Berea Mid Park proved that. Avon Lake, as well as here Midview, they all utilize special teams. If you can play that part of it, you give yourself additional opportunities. And that's something that both of these games had in common, was great special teams play.
Very good. Still continuing on in the Southwestern Conference, North Olmsted got to play their first game of the year. They played North Ridgeville, and they went on to a 28-0 victory over the Rangers. North Olmsted was playing their first game of 2020 after not being able to play game 1. They came out scoring first with Anthony Gurko on a 3-yard keeper for the Eagles TD. The extra point was good. It was 7-0 after 1 quarter. The Eagles would not look back, scoring 21 more points in the game, thanks to the quarterback, Anthony Gorkio. I hope I got that name right. I'm sorry, Anthony, who scored 4 touchdowns in the game for North Olmsted. The Eagles notched their first win of the season and are now 1-0. Probably the game of the week in the Southwestern Conference was Avon against Olmsted Falls. This one was very tightly contested. Avon pulled out a 35-32 victory. They improved to 2-0. Olmsted Falls drops to 1-1. This game was of big offensive plays and turnovers. That's totally Rob Troutman right there.
Robert Troutman.
After 1 quarter, the Bulldogs led thanks to a 2-point conversion run by Andrew Parkowski. This game went back and forth the whole time. The offense made some big plays, but the defense also made some big plays as well. Defensive plays in this game, the Bulldogs closed out the 3rd quarter with an amazing goal line stand. Avon had 1st and goal from the 3, then 2nd and goal from the 1. The big stand kept the Bulldogs in the game. Then the Eagles were able to strip the Bulldogs quarterback Charlie Silek at midfield, then scored to take a 28-25 lead 6 plays later. Olmsted Falls did answer back with an 8-play scoring drive to make it 32-28 before the Eagles put together their winning drive in the final 4 minutes. The Eagles would win 35-21 on a Nico Pappas 18-yard touchdown pass to Devin Hunter. Rob did get some stats from this game. Avon running back Devin Hunter had 26 rushes for 211 yards, 2 touchdowns. Avon quarterback Nico Pappas threw for 193 yards and 3 touchdowns. Olmsted Falls quarterback Charlie Silek led the Bulldogs with 62 rushing yards and a touchdown and threw for 215 and another score, while running back Andrew Parkowski finished with 60 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns in this one. We talked about Westlake football. They are still in the Southwestern Conference for 1 more year, but they are going to be, or this year they have technically an independent schedule, but they are still kind of sort of in the Southwestern Conference. So Rob did get that game in here, but they played Lutheran West. It was Lutheran West 51, Westlake 20. The Demons fell to Longhorns on senior night. Lutheran West was the beneficiary of 4 Demon turnovers that were returned for touchdowns. For Westlake, Will Ostrowski had a 6-yard TD run. Mackie Keenan found Dylan Bednar for 57 yards for another score, and Keenan had a 2-yard run for the Demons. Westlake will travel to Green High School next week, or this coming Friday, I should say, to play their game. Rob's nominee for the Southwestern Conference Player of the Week was Devin Hunter of Avon, who did rush for 211 yards on 26 carries, and he did have the go-ahead touchdown in the game that pushed Avon to a 35-32 victory over Olmsted Falls. His Coach of the Week nominee was Mike Elder of Avon. Back-to-back wins over top teams in the conference for the first 2 weeks of the season, Avon Lake and Olmsted Falls. The schedule coming up for this week, Midview will travel to Avon Lake. Amherst will play Berea Mid Park. North Ridgeville We'll travel to Avon, Olmsted Falls at North Olmsted, so a little inner city community neighbor rivalry there. And Westlake, as we mentioned just briefly earlier, we'll travel to Green. And that wraps up the Southwestern Conference.
Hey, good job.
I didn't do too bad. Rob would
Didn't do too bad.
Rob would be proud. And again, I apologize for any student athletes out there that I messed up their name. I know that stinks, so I apologize.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. We should really just start off every one of these recaps with, we apologize in advance for butchering the names. We try very hard to get them. And I'm going to tell you right now, there's a couple names in my suburban league that I'm just going to not even try. And I'm just going to assume that person knows who I'm talking about. But we'll go ahead anyway. Really great stuff in the Southwestern Conference, Josh. Really impressed with Avon. 2 back-to-back wins over top teams, like you mentioned. A comeback win against Avon Lake. Obviously, Avon Lake exercised some of its frustration on Berea Mid-Park this week. But, and then a pretty convincing win over Olmsted Falls. I mean, look, Avon is a team that every single year is in the area top 25. Is talked about as a team that can make a deep run. Coach Elder's got that program basically running on all cylinders. It's no longer rebuild, it's reload. Olmsted Falls, you know what? We were impressed last week because they passed a lot. And, well, more so than we're used to, I guess. And I think maybe they need to go back to the run a little bit. Maybe they need to start using some of that play action. Maybe they just need to not turn the ball over. Westlake. Guys, you can't give four defensive touchdowns to the other team and expect to win. But like the coach of Westlake said, LaRocca said they're a young team. So this is the stuff we expect from a young team that's still kind of learning, still understanding what, they had a big win last week, the first win in a season and over a season. They went up against a pretty good team in Lutheran West. That senior night, a lot to play for. It's what happens. So pretty impressive. North Ridgeville ran it. You would think that they would have had that advantage, like we talked about, against the North Olmsted team that didn't get a play last week. But North Olmsted, again, saved up, worked hard, got what they needed to do, and came out firing. It's exactly what you want. And you know what? Midview Amherst. I think Midview is in a kind of a rebuilding stage for the last couple of years, and adding to this the COVID-19 issues, obviously it's not helping anyone, but a team that's looking for a little bit of movement and a little bit of momentum. Midview's got to get off the schneid here. We got to see what they can do. It's 2 straight losses back to back, so it'll be interesting to see how Midview and how, if North Ridgeville can respond, especially coming up this week. I'm looking forward to I think it's the Avon. Not Avon, yeah, Olmsted, Avon Lake, Olmsted Falls, Avon Lake, or Olmsted Falls, North Olmsted.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's kind of a backyard brawl for them. But so, again, is Avon and North Ridgeville. What a statement that would be for Coach Durbin's team if they can knock off Avon, who's riding pretty high after 2 big wins in the conference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
So with that, Josh, I think I'm going to take over here. We're just going to touch on the GLC again. Ed kind of didn't really have a lot to do since there was only 2 official games that occurred in the GLC in week 2. Those 2 games featured Padua taking on Lakewood, and not much to write home if you're Lakewood. Padua soars to a 41-7 win over Lakewood. Our next game in GLC play is Walsh Jesuit traveling to take on Holy Name, and just like Lakewood, not a lot to write home about this. This Walsh Jesuit wins 24-7. Josh, the GLC was not well represented this week in the quantity of games and really the quality of games at this point. But we look forward to a more robust schedule. A majority of the teams kind of kick off in earnest this coming week. So we'll have some really interesting matchups. I know one of them is Bay versus Elyria Catholic. That's a big matchup in that GLC conference. We also have a couple of those. Most of the Parma schools are playing next week, so we should have a more robust schedule. With the lack of performance or lack of success, the GLC did not have an entrant into the coach of the week or the player of the week, unfortunately. But we use that as a building block for next week. Guess what, GLC? You gotta win to make it on. You can't be player of the week in the loss. I'm sorry, that's not the way it works.
Right.
Can't be coach of the week in the loss, and I don't think they would want it in the loss. So we're sticking to our guns there. But so that's the GLC wrap up. We'll go over the schedule a little bit later on. We'll definitely be posting that on Friday to give everyone a schedule on that. But now we move on to the piece de resistance, the one, the only, Sean Duffy, Ed's former colleague, cohort, confidant.
Doesn't sound the same when you're saying it.
I know, really? I try. I do try. We're going to start off in the Suburban League Week 2, and we had a slew of games to talk about. First off, we're going to do a little bit of national conference, starting off a little bit of business. Wadsworth was set to take on Stowe, but a positive COVID-19 test for a Wadsworth football player had canceled that game. At this point in time, there's no specific date of rescheduling. We can advise that on Saturday, Medina County Health Department did clear Wadsworth football program for football activities. So we anticipate that Wadsworth will proceed to host Nordonia in week 3. Stowe will host Highland in week 3. Again, we'll keep you posted on the rescheduling of that game should it happen going forward. Our next game in the National Conference featured the Hudson Explorers taking on the Brecksville Broadview Height Fighting Bees. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. The Bees played host to the Explorers, and the Explorers were on fire. Jacob Peltani led the Explorers to victory in week 2 in a week 2 road win against Brecksville in a back-and-forth game. Peltani finished the day with going 15 of 22 attempts passing, 225 yards, 3 passing touchdowns. Adding to that, he had 19 rushes for 112 yards. Hudson wide receiver Colin Pierce had 8 receptions, 122 yards, and 1 touchdown. Bees quarterback and Iowa commit Joe Labus was spectacular, going 23 of 33 for 306 yards, 1 pass touchdown, 1 rush touchdown. And Bees running back Garrett Kubitz had 23 carries, 105 yards, and 2 touchdowns. The difference in this game was 2 crucial fumbles by Brecksville. Those both led to touchdowns for the Hudson Explorers, and that was the difference as Hudson wins 38-28 against the Bees. Brecksville will travel to North Royalton in week 3, and Hudson will host Barberton in week 3. That is all for the National Conference. There's only 2 matchups in the National Conference, and one of them got canceled. Now we're moving on to the American Conference, and we find Aurora utilizing significantly good defense to get the better of a Revere team that was coming off not playing last week in a very defensive struggle. They were able to defeat Revere 12-7. Aurora quarterback Alex Moore finished the game 10 of 19, 49 yards, and 1 touchdown. Aurora running back Evan McVeigh had 1 rushing touchdown. Revere running back Shane Slattery and Bo Chrisman both had 101 yards rushing and 38 carries combined and combined for 1 touchdown. There was a defensive effort by Aurora was really the difference in this. They were able to control the line of scrimmage and not allow Shane Slattery or Bo Chrisman to really get outside, and that was one of the things that Revere was going to focus on this year. Aurora continues their road trip as they travel to face Talmadge in week 3, and Revere will host Cuyahoga Falls. Speaking of Cuyahoga Falls, their debut in the American Conference was against Copley, and they probably would have wished for a better outcome as Copley completely dominates Cuyahoga Falls in the season home opener, 40-6. Copley running back Preston Taylor had 3 rushing touchdowns on the night, and seniors Daryl Pringle and Aaron Clayton each contributed an additional rushing touchdown. Cuyahoga Falls' only score came on a 60-yard touchdown run by senior running back Kobe Brown. The Cuyahoga Falls Black Tigers are 0-1 and 0-1 in their new American Conference. Copley improves to 1-0 as they did not play last week. Cuyahoga Falls will host Revere in week 3, and Copley will host Twinsburg in week 3. Now we move on to our non-conference games, and there was a lot of non-conference / cross-conference matchups in the Suburban League for week 2. We'll start off in Greene as Talmadge traveled in to play Greene. And it was a back-and-forth game the entire time, but Greene was able to eke out a 27-20 win over Talmadge. Talmadge quarterback Ty Hurst finished the game 25 of 46 for 447 yards passing and 2 touchdowns. This is a theme all week. The losing quarterbacks have put up great numbers, and I'm going to get to them as I go here. But losing quarterbacks, and as I mentioned about the GLC and I mentioned about the SWC, you got to win to make it into my players of the week pool, and none of these guys were able to pull off the win. We'll go through it again. Just to finish up, wide receiver Seth Yakabuchi, and I put that name on there because it was fun to say as I was typing it, and Martin both had touchdown receptions from Ty Hurst. Unfortunately, it just was not enough as they fall to Greene. In the end, Talmadge is 0-1. They host Aurora in week 3, as I mentioned. Nordonia traveled in to take on Barberton, and then talk about a back-and-forth game. This was a back-and-forth game all night in an opportunity that cost a lot of touchdowns, and I'm talking about a lot of touchdowns here. Nordonia was able to squeak a win out 41-40 over Barberton. Nordonia's quarterback, Billy Levac, had 5 touchdowns in the game, 4 passing, 1 running. Barberton's Xavier Macon, running back, had 4 touchdowns rushing. The difference in this came down to came down to a missed extra point. Ed, if you're listening, if you're watching, what would you say about that? Kicker's got to kick. Kicker's got to make kicks. That's the way it works. So is the way it works. Nordonia wins 41-40 over Barberton. Barberton's 0-2 on the year. Nordonia 1-1. My final non-conference game was a good one as well. Also picking the same score. North Royalton traveled to take on Highland. Crosstown matchup, pretty close. Used to be big rivals. Highland was able to hold off a late fourth quarter comeback attempt by the North Royalton Bears, and again eke out a win 41-40. The Highlands quarterback Aaron Phillips led the Hornets offensively, going 9 of 13, 137 yards and 2 touchdowns passing. He also contributed 20 carries, 102 yards rushing with 2 rushing touchdowns. Bears quarterback Michael Piazza, and I'm going to say this again, and I'm going to be very clear. If he would have won the game, he'd have been my player of the week, hands down. Listen to this stat line. I'm not kidding you when I give you these numbers. 18 of 31, 402 yards passing, 5 passing touchdowns, and a rushing touchdown. That's player of the week stuff. The only problem is that they went for 2 at the end of the game and didn't get it. And that's what's going to happen, and that was the difference here. As, again, Highland won 41-40. But Michael Piazza ended up with 18 of 31, 402 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Killian O'Callaghan, I love that name, 6 receptions, 157 yards, and a touchdown for the Bears. Vince Kropowski, 5 receptions, 174 yards, 2 touchdowns for the Bears. Running back Zaydan Abumeda, and I swear to God, that's the way it's spelled, 16 carries, 28 yards, 5 catches for 12 yards, and a touchdown. Josh, they scored 26 points in the fourth quarter. They were down 41-21. They should have won this game. You know what happened? They elected to go for 2 and didn't get it after they scored their final touchdown. That was the difference. Now they lose 41-40.
I don't know. Hindsight being 2020, if you rail off 26 points in a quarter, I think right there you're feeling pretty strong that you're going to be able to score from 2 yards out. So
listen, and they gave it to their stud running back, Abu Zameda. I think that's how you spell his name. Abu Hamda, whatever. And he got stuffed. He got to the 1 yard line, got stuffed. Credit Highlands defense for stepping up when they absolutely needed to and securing that win. Uh, Highlands 1-1. North Royalton's 0-2. North Royalton will host Brecksville. The Bees are coming to North Royalton next week, and Highland will travel to take on Stowe. I was able to select 2 coaches of this week, and I selected one from the American Conference and one from the National Conference. I selected Bob Mahalik, Aurora, who again you have 4 straight road games. You win a tough defensive battle, rallied the troops there. Great job by Bob Mahalik out of Aurora. And then Jeff Fox for Nodonia, bouncing back from a loss last week and getting it done in a close game against Barberton. They're my player of the week. And like I said, Josh, I had a lot of stats. I had a lot of places to go, but I had to pick winners. I picked Jacob Peltani, 337 total yards, 3 touchdowns, and basically led that team to a victory over a very, 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 very good my place. Hudson, or not Hudson. It's there. Or no, Hudson. Yeah, against a very good Brecksville team. He doesn't play for. Okay. Yeah. See what happens when we do this on Tuesday.
I hear you.
I'm not used to this. I'm usually I got my juices flowing on Monday night. Now I'm stagnant. So yeah, Jacob Peltani from Hudson, 337 total yards, 3 touchdowns, was my player of the week.
Well, while we're at it, Sean, let's do
that.
Polls are done. Our first poll, G&G Fitness. Let's talk real quick about G&G Fitness. One of the industry leaders in fitness equipment and residential and commercials. Any of our viewers, followers, anyone listening to this episode of our podcast, you can go actually to G&G Fitness's website, livefit.com, and actually nominate your own coach of the week. You could go ahead and do that. And G&G Fitness, if they decide that your coach is deserving, they'll hook them up with some good stuff there. So just head over to livefit.com and visit one of our best sponsors that we have, G&G Fitness, and they do sponsor our Coach of the Week poll. So again, real quick, the nominees that we had were Pinzoni from Brunswick, Elder from Avon, Mahalik from Aurora, and Fox for Nodonia. Unfortunately, this one went all Brunswick Blue Devils on this one with 83% of the vote. Coach Pinzoni from Brunswick did take home the G&G Fitness Coach of the Week for week number 2. Now, let's move on to the more exciting poll that we had that actually ended today. It was our RT Productions Player of the Week poll for week 2. And just to do a quick reminder, our nominees were Ian Kipp from Menor, Devin Hunter from Avon, Jacob Peltani from Hudson, and the Brunswick Blue Devil defense. Now, total 888 votes in this one. And
really? 888? I like it.
With 34% of the vote, this week's SOT Player of the Week will go to Menor's Ian Kipp. He did have 341 yards and 3 touchdowns in the air, and he did add 85 yards rushing in their 27-12 victory over Euclid. So he is the Player of the Week. Others receiving votes, the Brunswick defense finished second with 30% of the vote. Jacob Peltani of Hudson finished with 28% of the vote. And Devin Hunter, who had a great game, rounded out the fourth with 8% of the vote there. So congratulations to Ian Kipp and all the players that got nominated. They're all well-deserving for that one. So kind of segueing into, because we had the Brunswick defense as a Player of the Week. Now, we're going to talk about the game of the week, which was Brunswick and Medina. Now, if you were just to look at the stats, don't look at the score, just look at the stats in this game, you would think, well, how the heck did Brunswick defense get nominated for Player of the Week? Total yards in this game, Medina outgained Brunswick 526 yards to 241. Quarterback Drew Aller for Medina set a Medina County record with 502 passing yards. He was 41 of 70. 3 receivers.
Whoa.
Wait,
I'm sorry to interrupt. Okay, go ahead.
3 receivers for Medina had over 100 yards. Luke Hensley had 12 receptions for 180 yards, 2 touchdowns. Brennan Schramm had 10 receptions for 115 yards, and Jawan Jackson had 5 receptions for 101 yards. So, Sean, you had questions.
I have several questions.
Shoot.
Medina threw the ball 70 times and completed
70 times.
40. How many?
41.
41 of those 70. That's like a lot of passes. I was going to do the math there, but I'm a public school kid and we don't know how that works.
Yes.
4 receivers had over 100 yards receiving.
3 receivers had
3.
over 100.
Okay. And they outgained Brunswick 520 yards to what?
526 to 241.
Okay,
So,
you're going to need to explain to me how the Brunswick defense made the top 4 because I'm a star numbers guy. Doesn't work.
Okay, well, let's just talk about the game because opening up in this game, I'll first say this. It was my first game covering this season, and I got to say the weather was absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
On at Brunswick Auto Mart Stadium.
Yeah.
Noted that in our story on SOT podcast, sportsontap.podcast.com. But this one started off real quickly for the Brunswick Blue Devils. Jake Charette took it to the house from 48 yards on the first possession. Medina would later answer back late in that quarter when Drew Aller hit wide receiver Luke Hensley for their first connection of the game. As they did in the first quarter, Brunswick was first to score in the second when running back Nick Vadini bulldozed into the end zone from 1 yard out. And that made it 14-7. On the next drive, Aller hit Hensley from 28 yards, tying the score at 14 with 8 minutes left in the half. This is where the Brunswick defense started to kind of pick up on the stinginess here. They were able to pick off Aller at the 4:20 mark in the second quarter. And then Brunswick was able to drive down and score the go-ahead touchdown with 12 seconds left on the clock, and Brunswick went into halftime with a 21-14 lead. And I got to say, on that last drive of the half, Brunswick did a really good job of time management, running the ball, making good, smart plays to get down and score that touchdown. And that really gave them a lot of momentum going into the second half. This is where it went bad for Brunswick in one aspect, and it could have got a lot worse for them. On the first possession of the second half, team captain Jake Charette got wrapped up as he was doing a sweep towards the sideline, and his leg got caught under him. I was about 50 feet from it, and instantly when he went down, you knew something was wrong. Stretcher came out. Air cast was applied to his left leg. He did have a compound fracture in his leg. His season is done. And there was a delay in the game for about 15 minutes, and it was very quiet. And the look of Brunswick, they seemed kind of down on themselves. But I was wrong. As Jake Charette left the game in the stretcher, he was really getting his team pumped up. It was really good to see. And you know what? They really answered. Because on the very next play, Nick Vadini scored a touchdown for the Blue Devils, and that made it 28-14 in the third quarter. Now, we talked about the Brunswick defense. Now, part of this, and I will be honest, part of this was on Medina. They had a lot of fourth down. They attempted a lot of fourth down conversions, but the Brunswick defense did not break it all. They bent a little bit, but they did not break. This whole game, Medina was racking up yards, as we talked about in the stats earlier. But Brunswick was able to make the stops when they needed to. They were able to make key turnovers, key stops on fourth down to make a turnover on downs. The group constantly pressured Aller into making some very bad plays. Now, when you're throwing the ball 70 times, you're in the shotgun, so you're dropping back deep. Brunswick had a powerful rush from the defensive line, and when Drew Aller would drop back, you seem to have Brunswick defensive players right on him, and he would start drifting back even further, making inaccurate throws. But nonetheless, Medina still tried to fight and they somewhat got back in this game. A big 35-yard catch by Brandon Schramm. And not to mention, he did have an awesome one-handed catch that he did get on video, and that was posted to our SOT podcast Twitter page.
Great video by you, by the way.
Great job by Schramm for making the catch. He did have a big 35-yard catch that set up the Bees on the 1-yard line, and Dorian Boylan actually scored the touchdown, cut the lead to 28-21. But Brunswick would end up forcing Medina into another turnover on downs on 4th down late in the game, and that sealed the deal. In this one, Brunswick comes away with a huge 28-21 victory over their county rival Medina. Brunswick improves to 1-1. Medina drops to 0-2. So next week's game against Strongsville for Medina is a huge game. Brunswick will travel to Elyria. That's a winnable game for them, but Elyria's a team that's, they have Jaheim Atkinson, who the Brunswick defense really going to have to take into effect coming into this game. So it's going to be a tough game for them, but it's winnable for them to get above that 500 mark in the conference. But this was such an interesting game. It was a long game, over 3 hours long. But when you just look at the box score and not the score, you look at all the stats, it's just amazing that Brunswick came away with a victory. And they were able to do that against this high-powered Medina offense that they have. A good victory. Some other stats that we had in this game for Brunswick: Ethan Fritz, quarterback for the Blue Devils, 12 of 18 for 122 yards, 3 touchdowns. He was very careful with the ball, didn't turn it over. Really, once Charette went out, now Charette is kind of the all-purpose. He could play some quarterback, he can line up at wide receiver, play some running back. He was definitely a team leader, but Ethan Fritz really stepped up in this game and took the reins for his team and really led them to victory. Nick Vidini, 17 rushing attempts, 52 yards. He also added 3 receptions for 26 yards. He had 2 touchdowns on the night. Jake Charette, 4 receptions early in the games for 74 yards, and he had 5 rushing attempts for 37 yards and a touchdown. And again, he went out of this game at the 10:48 mark in the 3rd quarter. And props to Brunswick for, seeing their team captain get down like that. Nobody wants to see that, let's be honest. And that's tough for a team to come back to. But they bounced back, and it was good for them, and they did a really good job. Again, Brunswick's defense forced 4 interceptions for Drew Aller, and they came away with a big victory. So that's why we kind of put them in there as the 4th nominee for Player of the Week. All
right, you convinced me.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was interesting. I thought that was just really neat to see such a differential in offensive production. But the defense just really, really picked up. And the defense for Brunswick picked their spots really good to make some big plays, stops on downs. But, again, Medina was really trying to force the issue. They did some turnover on downs, went for it on 4th down in their own territory. And Brunswick was able to get the stop. So an interesting game nonetheless. We'll see how this goes further into the Greater Cleveland Conference schedule as we move on to week 3. John, any comments, questions about the game anymore?
No, I mean, listen, anytime you lose a key player like Charette, you expect kind of a shock, you know what I mean? Kind of an adjustment period, so to speak. And the fact that on the very next play, they scored a touchdown, that indicates where Coach Pinzoni has this team right now. They know they're good. I mean, it's impressive. Like you said, they were in the backfield every time they got the ball, or the Medina went back to pass, and it seemed like obviously with 70 attempts, they weren't committed to the running game all that much. So, I mean, that's a great – for a defensive coach – that tells your line. That tells your defensive linemen and your line. Well, not so much your linebackers, but your defensive linemen. Forget about the run. Pin your ears back and go. And that's what they did.
That's exactly what happened. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. And give props to Ed Dick, because he said last week in that 14-7 loss to Euclid. He said the Brunswick defense was in it. They kept them, and they did that this game. Now, In the first half of the game, Medina was throwing the ball all around, and I'm like, oh boy, this could be a long day for Brunswick if they don't make any stops.
Right.
Well, they made a few adjustments, and Medina was still able to move the ball, but they weren't able to score. And when you're able to move the ball but not score, it's just like, if you have all the stats and score all the touchdowns, but if you don't win the game, you're not going to be player of the week. So kind of similar in that aspect.
It's one of our rules at Sports on Tap. You got to win the game to get in the player of the week conversation.
Right. So, again, props to Brunswick for a really well-played game against a tough conference opponent. So, like you mentioned earlier, Sean, we're going to divide and conquer, and this is how it's going to be for a foreseeable future, as three of us, me, you, and Rob, he's going to make an appearance.
We hope. I don't know. We hope. I'm waiting for this call on Thursday to be like, I can't go.
Yeah.
We're going to do 2 games. But, yeah, Rob's
At
going.
any rate, so the first of our 3 games that we will cover, I will be at North Olmsted for the Olmsted Falls North Olmsted game. Looking forward to that. Rob will be at the Bay Elyria Catholic game that we mentioned earlier. And, Sean, you will be?
I will be heading North Royalton way. I'll be heading to North Royalton to watch the Bears take on the Bees of Brecksville, coming in to take on North Royalton.
Awesome.
I'm really excited to see, now that I have some names, Michael Piazza from the North Royalton and Joe Lavis of Brecksville, those two quarterbacks put up gaudy numbers, both in losses last week. It's going to be interesting to see how these teams respond. I'm very excited, and obviously I love going down to North Royalton. They got a great stands, great stadium there, and I'll be on the field doing my best to live tweet the game. I'll attempt video. Every time I do it, I always delete it because I don't know what I'm doing. So be prepared for a lot of descriptive words on Twitter coming out of North Royalton.
Oh, okay. Well, we're all going to be on SOT podcast, so all you got to do is follow the game. We'll probably come up with some cool little hashtag for each of the games that we're at, just so we can specify. We'll talk about that as we go on further. And then after that, you're going to have a small write-up for each of the games on our website, sportsontappodcast.com. That's where you'll find a lot of the schedule for our conferences, the scores, and our recaps of our game of the weeks that we visited. So make sure you head over there, sportsontappodcast.com. As usual, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. This is where you'll see this video along with our Facebook Live videos that are recordable as well. And not to mention, hopefully we're gearing up soon to get the hockey going. So we're going to be doing some audio for the Greater Cleveland High School Hockey League. We are the official media partner for the Greater Cleveland High School Hockey League. So we're looking forward to the upcoming hockey season as well. So a lot of things going on. Finally starting to feel like we're getting back in the swing of things.
It does.
Normalcy when it comes to sports. Normalcy, whatever.
Normalcy.
That's a good word.
That's not a word.
It is.
No, it's not.
It is. If you could say gaudy, I could say normal.
Gaudy numbers. Gaudy is a word.
I know. Whatever. I didn't know.
It's that Brunswick education coming back to bite you in the butt again.
That's fine. That's fine.
No, first off, I want to say great job covering the Brunswick game. I followed that all night, Friday night. Josh, very good job. We will be back next week, 7:30, 8 o'clock.
Yeah, 8 o'clock. We'll be on Facebook Live. Other than that, we appreciate everyone for liking us, following us, all that good stuff. And we especially like you sticking around and watching this video and seeing Sean's great look there.
Yeah. Nothing like
so with that being said,
no.
The champ is spoken. Everyone have a good night. We will see you next week to recap week 3.
Be on the lookout. We will post our week 3 schedules on the website probably Friday afternoon to keep you updated as best we can on the scores. They will be updated no later than Saturday morning. So Big shout out, Josh. I enjoy every time I get on here, but when it's just you and me carrying the load, I can't think of a better partner in crime, except when you take that belt off, it doesn't
Can't
look
do that
right.
because the champ is here.
Oh,
Have a good night, everyone. We'll see you.
bye.
Sports on tap. Game on.